we have to hit a certain number of orders per month to take care of all of the associated costs of running the business. And once we break through that ceiling, then we'll start to be able to be profitable, provided that nothing unforeseen happens.
I pride myself on having one of the least formal podcasts. I'm always getting up to adjust the camera or something.
That's great.
It's kind of like the consequences of not having a studio,
It's overrated. I mean, spontaneity in life and everything. I mean, I don't know. It'll keep things interesting.
Hey, Aaron, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. I've probably walked about 10 miles today.
This is the second time I've put you on camera.
True. Yeah. The last time was in like 2012 or something. So it's been a while.
Oh, man, I hope it wasn't as far back as 2012.
Maybe not that far. Maybe like 2014.
So you are visiting Japan. You're here on vacation.
Yeah, you could call it that. My mother, for, I don't know, a couple of years now has wanted to hike the Kumonokodo pilgrimage trail. And that's kind of what got us here. And so we just finished that up the day before yesterday. So we were on the trail for 5 days in the Kii Peninsula, and it was amazing. And so this is kind of decompression time, I guess. Urban decompression.
We are sitting in
Dontonbori.
Bori, which is like kind of the fisherman's wharf of Osaka.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
But it's kind of got this interesting neon, like what would have been the future in the past.
Which is increasingly kind of what Japan is looking like, in a way, because I feel like there's a certain weight of the 80s hanging over Japan right now, just because of the kind of like the economic boom and all of the development that followed it and how that has slowed down since the economy has slowed here. And now it's like, in a way, I mean, I still need to go to China, so I have to give the big caveat that, like, I don't really know what's going on in Beijing and what's going on in Shanghai and all that, but it seems to me that, like, China's way more future than the U.S. is right now, than Japan is right now. Food. All right, finally.
But we got that size. It's
There
good.
we go.
Because that way, it doesn't get warm. We can get another one after
That's
a
cool.
while.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers.
Kanpai.
Kanpai. But yeah, the Japan future is also very nostalgic for me right now, because I think the first time I came here, came to Japan was in 1993. And so it reminds me of a future I was especially attached to as an early teenager. And now it's like almost like the future has kind of caught up and superseded there's a newer future in different places now.
Newer future is like an incredible term. It needs to be on a t-shirt at least.
Newer future. No more old future. Don't forget to eat. I've actually eaten today, and I know you haven't. Could always get time back in the editing.
I don't do enough exercise to justify eating.
Oh, stop. Everyone has to eat. Otherwise, your brain doesn't work.
Okay, so for those who don't know, as I mentioned the first time I had Aaron Shinn on camera, he is one of my design mentors. One of the people who actually taught me how to be a designer, taught me a lot of the technicalities of design, as well as design thinking. So I owe this podcast in part to Aaron Shinn, who, as a child, I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to steamroll you. When I was in university, I was asked by Michael Boccieri, how do you rate Aaron Shinn as a artist or designer? And I was like, he's the best I know.
I'm embarrassed. And I have to say, I don't remember teaching you anything, but if I may have been a useful resource at some time, I'm happy about that.
Do you remember that fractal design terrain generator application?
KPT Bryce.
There you go. You demonstrated that to me once.
That shit was so awesome.
There's like this whole, I don't want to call it era, but a whole like suite of art tools that just don't exist anymore that I know of.
But it's like we went from canned, like KPT Bryce is very canned, right? Like it's a tool that has an incredibly specific outcome. And we went from like KPT Bryce to like, which was at its time, like in the early 90s, it was a breakthrough because it made, like procedural textures and things like that really accessible. Like where you could just kind of like drag and drop like, oh, okay, here's a texture that would like map different kinds of terrains onto different heights of a depth map. And so you could have like, convincing like valleys full of greenery and like rock in the middle of mountains and like snow-capped peaks. Like you could just slap it on and it would look fairly realistic. And now it's like we've gone from these like super specific, easy to use tools to like Houdini, right? Which are like just, to me, Houdini is like magic. There's too much. It's far too deep for me to even touch at this point in my career, because I actually started out working with these really high level tools that are very specific and have very specific outputs. And like now all of the cool 3D shit is just like totally inaccessibly complex for me.
You might be interested in checking out something like Unity, which I used to work for.
Oh yeah. Unity's so cool. I mean,
when we were using Bryce to make terrains, we had to hit the render button and wait for a very long time to see the output.
Yeah.
And Unity basically doing real-time rendering.
Totally. I love that. There's a studio, maybe it's one person, I'm not exactly sure because I haven't met them yet, called Cloaking in LA that does really awesome like underground party visuals in the Unity engine. They have a really cool, like kind of gritty, kind of vintage cyberpunk black and white aesthetic that's kind of rad. And like it's inspiring to see people using Unity to like do non-game things and to use it for like, more kind of experiential or audio triggered or kind of VJ oriented applications.
There's a guy in Saigon named Crazy Monkey. And he used to have this thing called Crazy Monkey Box, but now he's started this other thing called the Box Collective. So it's more than just him. It's him and a bunch of apprentices, as far as I know.
All right.
And I really want to get him on here. And he's been doing real-time visualizations. I don't think he uses Unity for any of it, but he's been doing... a lot of his final output ends up being in nightclubs and stuff, but... and it's all very artsy and glitchy and cyberpunky. A lot of stuff. He's a little heavy, a little like a Hote. Do you know Hote? Like the fat Buddha.
Oh yeah.
He kind of has that vibe going on, and he plays with that. Like he will use himself as a Buddha statue in some of his arts. It's kind of weird and funny, but also he used to paint flying penises.
Okay.
Like that was kind of his motif. So I got a little off track there. Aaron is, I assume your main output, other than being a father now since the last time we talked, you spend most of your time on your tea company.
Yeah.
August Uncommon Tea. August.la.
No, just August.la.
Yeah.
There's no... We actually do have a couple of other... We have a few .coms like AugustUncommonTea.com and AugustTea.com, but we mostly used August.la just because it's short.
And you guys are based in LA.
Right.
Though LA itself is probably a country abbreviation, right? Not the city.
Exactly. It's Latvia. But nobody in LA knows that, and nobody cares. So it works for us.
That's hilarious.
I mean, it might confuse some Latvians, but I don't think anybody's interested in our tea in Latvia. Yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
I want to import your tea to Japan.
That would be amazing.
Is that something I'm allowed to do?
I've heard, well, okay, as an individual, you can definitely get away with it. We do have customers here, but if we were to do it on a commercial scale, I understand that the restrictions are very intense. Lots of paperwork. I mean, of course, because like any island, there are very tight controls on agricultural imports because the risks are extremely high of,
Also, they don't want you competing with their domestic tea production, probably.
That may be the case, but it's, it's like they're terrified of of microorganisms that can be destructive to local crops or, anything that shouldn't be here. Invasive species, invasive pests, all that stuff. So they're very, very careful. So we're really not doing any international business yet. We're completely focused on the U.S. at this point for a variety of just practical, boring reasons.
How's business going?
It's great. We're in a bit of a period where I'm kind of white knuckling it a little bit. So ever since, let me give you a little background. We had everything click. Like finally the gears, the growth gears meshed in September 2018. And we finally managed to find a way to build our sales and grow the company profitably through paid social media. And we've tried to do that before, maybe 2 other times, but we never quite had the know-how or the right people working on it. We finally found the right team. And then ever since then, it was like 20% growth a month, 25% growth a month, 50% growth a month. And so like on average, we over the last year have grown about 20% per month, which is insane and very hard to keep up with. We've had to we went from having 0 employees, Gina and I are the full-time founders, so no external employees, to having now 4 with a 5th coming on, Monday, I believe, and potentially like 3 more in the next 4 or 5 months. We went from shipping, I don't know, maybe 250 orders a month to I think peaking at 3,000 orders last month. So we moved from our loft to an 800 square foot dedicated space to now a 2,300 square foot warehouse. And then we just leased another 1,700 square foot warehouse in the same center. And it's just going to keep escalating from here. So it's been growing a lot, but the thing that we haven't yet achieved is profitability. And so that's really the fulcrum that we're at right now, where we're just waiting for the weather to get a little colder so we can grow a little faster. And hopefully,
you think that tea sales will increase during winter?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that it's not a unique effect to the U.S., but in the U.S., there's definitely a really strong seasonality with tea where you have pretty much from fall through spring, you have good kind of public interest in tea, and people are interested in tea, particularly hot tea, because that's really all we sell loose tea and most people make that hot. Many iced tea drinkers don't brew their own tea. They buy ready to drink tea. So even though our tea makes insanely good iced tea, it's not, our customer is not exactly somebody who's like brewing iced tea to drink at home or anyway. So our kind of like our high efficiency seasons are when it's cold outside. So we're looking, now it's in mid-September, and by the end of this month, we're hoping that things are moving really efficiently and we can start growing very quickly again.
When you tell me that you're doing 3,000 orders a month, but you're not yet profitable, that sounds like weird to me. So can you explain for our viewers out there and to me, like
the mechanics of that?
The mechanics of
Yeah. So, well, essentially, like we found that, we have a variety of fixed costs, right? Like, the cost of the product, the cost of the product cost is a proportion of sales. We have our other kind of costs that are related to shipping every order. So the labor involved in packing and shipping a product, the average cost of goods, our fixed costs like rent and founder salaries and stuff like that. And then also another, variable percentage cost of every sale is how much we have to pay to acquire customers. So basically how efficient our ads are. And so we found that that in inefficient months, we grow, inefficient meaning our ads aren't very effective because people aren't very interested in tea. We don't grow super, super quickly. But in efficient months, like when the weather's cold and people are interested in tea, we can grow very profitably. So really, it's like what we're looking for is hitting a point where our profit rises faster than our costs do. Because, of course, every time that you that you have to order more product. You have to, you have to spend money for inventory. You have to spend money for advertising. You have to spend money for labor to pack and ship the stuff. You have to spend money on shipping, spend money on packaging, etc. And in an ideal world, as volume goes up, all of those costs become slightly lower because you're buying in higher volume. You take advantage of economies of scale. But, you also have to continually watch things very carefully. So in our modeling, we hit the tipping point in the next couple of months if we're able to hit our volume projections. So, we have sales projections where, like, after we hit a certain figure of sales per month, if we don't increase our existing costs proportionately, like if everything stays the same as it is right now, we'll start to become profitable. So anyway, I apologize for the meandering, rambling discussion, but really what it comes down to, if you were to do the super soundbitey version, is that we have to hit a certain number of orders per month to take care of all of the associated costs of running the business. And once we break through that ceiling, then we'll start to be able to be profitable, provided that nothing unforeseen happens.
And I guess provided that you don't try to acquire customers at a greater ad spend than you currently are doing.
That's the risk, yeah. And, if you talk to people who are selling you the ads, they'll encourage you to kind of like take the long view and accept less profitable results and all that stuff. But I mean, it'd be very, very easy for us to run out of runway by not insisting on very efficient advertising. So,
but at some point you could presumably stop advertising through paid ads and just remarket to your existing customer base, right?
We'd have to reach a really tremendous scale to be able to do that.
How much do you think advertising encourages existing customers to place another order?
I think it's very significant. If you look at the breakdown of our ads, and I think in any direct-to-consumer brand, you will see that the remarketing is massively more efficient than the prospecting audience. So prospecting is what we'll call cold audience. So somebody who's never heard of the brand before, who may or may not be interested. But prospecting is usually fairly inefficient in that you have to show the ad to a lot of people before somebody makes a purchase. But for people who have previously purchased from you, especially if you're selling a product that's a consumable, like tea, where, you drink it and then it's gone and then you need more. It's not a durable good where you might buy it once or twice a year or once every several years. There's a great opportunity to remarket to your existing customers because they're the ones that know you and know your product, and they definitely will know if they want more. So we typically see, at present, I think we're seeing about 5 times the conversion rate for remarketing versus prospecting. That's a lot of efficiency.
Can you say that one more time?
So we're seeing about a 5x efficiency between prospecting and remarketing. So, but the thing about remarketing though is that it doesn't work unless you already have a lot of customers. So, at our current stage, I think we've got, we're probably in the like mid 5 figures in terms of like our customer count. And so, remarketing to that to that audience is not, there's just not all that many people. A mid 5 figures is not that large when we're talking about a remarketing audience.
That's like mid 5 figures is 50,000.
Ish. In that general range. So like, if we had a customer base of, 10 million customers, we would have a lot more material to work with. Material. I apologize. That's an inappropriate metaphor. But we would just have a much bigger audience to remarket to.
Right.
So at some later stage, we might be able to see a lot more growth and a lot more reliable income through remarketing. But right now, we still are a very early stage company. We definitely utilize it, but but the thought of turning off prospecting is way, 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 way down the road.
Why did you guys get into the tea business?
Because we noticed a gap, and that gap, it was that basically Gina, my partner, and I both used to travel a lot in our previous career. So I used to be a design consultant at IDEO, and I did a lot of work in Japan and other countries. And Gina used to be a French professor and did a lot of research work, and used to actually lived in Paris for a long time. And we're kind of just culinary people. We, travel through our stomachs in a way and are always looking for exciting things to eat and drink. And tea was not an exception. So, whenever we traveled, we would be like, oh, this tea looks cool. And we'd bring stuff home. And we ended up smuggling like quite a bit of tea home in our travels. And we had a great big closet full of amazing tea. And it wasn't until we settled in Los Angeles and stopped traveling so much that we finally ran out of all of that tea that we had bought overseas. And after that point, we were like, okay, well, we can't go to France. We can't go to Tokyo. We need to like get some tea let's just try buying tea online. So we ordered some stuff from company A and ordered some stuff from company B and then company C and company D. And like, we're consistently disappointed. Like everything we were buying just felt a little bit unsophisticated, a little bit low quality. So
you weren't buying French brands or Japanese brands. You were buying U.S. brands?
Well, exactly. Yeah, we were buying tea from North American companies. And we were buying the things that were accessible to us. A big reason why we didn't want to buy the brands that we loved and were accustomed to is because of outrageous shipping. I mean, it just seems stupid to pay 30 euro to ship 15 euro worth of tea from Paris to LA. Like, it's just crazy. So it just didn't seem practical. So that's why we were like, okay, let's see if we could buy something from a more affordable domestic company. And we bought tea from the US and Canada, and it was just deeply disappointing. And that's when the light bulb went on. We were like, oh shit, I think we know something that other people don't. And that is that tea could be more sophisticated and interesting and kind of novel and exciting and delicious. Because tea tends to fall into two big categories in the US. It tends to be either like really kind of very inexpensive grocery store tea, or maybe there are more than two categories. So very inexpensive grocery store tea, like everybody's heard of like Lipton and like, brands like that. And then there's lots and lots of like health teas, I guess, or functional beverage teas, like, anybody who goes to Whole Foods has seen these brands. There's a wall of them. There are teas for every imaginable ailment or discomfort or, health need.
Do you think any of those actually work, like as advertised?
Sure. I mean, a lot of them are herbal medicine, but I mean, it was just clear before we started the company that space was already very saturated. It's like, how could we possibly compete with brands that have clinical studies that, prove that this ingredient has this effect? And, it's not something we're passionate about either. I mean, we think all tea is healthy. So we don't need to go beyond that. I mean, we just wanted to make a tea that is delicious. And then I guess the third category is the ultra traditional kind of like, teas that belong to another culture. Because, in a way, you could say the U.S. doesn't really have a tea culture.
We threw that one into the ocean, into the harbor, right?
Well, I mean, it's true. I think that the Boston Tea Party is like a great cultural schism. I mean, it was the time when America rejected tea and rejected colonial power, and tea. I don't think people actually think about it this way, but I mean, for a period, tea was unpatriotic and actually like contraband. So people were smuggling tea after the Boston Tea Party. But I mean, that was the time when the U.S. went from being a tea drinking nation to a coffee and chocolate nation. So anyway, I guess the third big category that I think about is the ultra traditional high end. So, I mean, tea comes from China. I mean, there is no bones about it. Like, China has a easily 3,000-year-old tea culture. Like, a lot of the finest tea in the world is grown in China. And there's just Chinese tea culture is ancient and beautiful and amazing. And that's just one example. I mean, there's also an amazing Japanese tea culture, an amazing, Central European and North African tea culture, an amazing British tea culture. But none of them are American. But so there are brands who are catering to bringing these foreign at least to an American perspective, tea cultures to the US and to do that in the most authentic, high quality way possible. That's also not us, because that's, that was when we started our research, it became clear to us that that's very intimidating to a lot of people. Because it feels like you have to have a very high degree of skill and sophistication and knowledge even to be able to enjoy that kind of beverage. So, so that was kind of what led us to find our direction within tea, to make it about almost to take inspiration from like cocktails and from craft beer and from wine and from, and other categories of beverage that have been reinvented and made exciting, which tea has not. Tea is still sleepy.
So, to give you guys an example of August uncommon tea, you see, if you look through their, actually, I'm going to just throw it up here. I'm going to show an example of your website right here, what you're selling right now.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
So it's scrolling past this right now.
Okay.
And you're going to see a lot of, I'm going to say complex flavor profiles. Like, you're going to see words like bourbon. You're going to see words like deep forest. I don't know. You have a lot of emotive words used, a lot of flavor profile words used that you do see when you talk about wine or craft beer. We say hints of,
sure,
notes
totally,
of
totally.
nutmeg,
right?
For instance,
right. Well, and so like, I'll give a few specific examples of like some of the blends that like really I think define us in a way. We have. For a tea company, we have a really small number of blends. Right now, it's less than 30. And they, like our most popular blend is called Low Country, and it's a black tea with bourbon and burnt sugar notes. And it's wildly popular. It's a really strong, powerful breakfast tea, and it's not an English breakfast. It's not an Earl Grey. And in fact, we don't even sell those teas. We don't make them at all because you can get them anywhere.
Right.
But, Low Country has a kind of like, a kind of magic about it that I can't really define. But that's a crowd pleaser. So to go to the other end of the spectrum, like one of the most exotic weirdo teas that we have is called the Black Lodge, which is a sweet black tea with kind of a almost a truffle note to it. It's a smoky truffle tea. So it has a very kind of like, it has olive leaf in it and kind of campfire notes. So it even tastes a little bit like percolator coffee. And it's inspired to a certain extent by, by the Twin Peaks TV series. And it's completely and totally bizarre. And it's definitely a polarizing love it or hate it kind of tea. And the people who love it are totally fascinated by it and drawn in. And it's for like people who love peaty scotch and, just kind of like very dank, intense flavors. But it's not for everybody. And so, we always try to balance, between having some novel crowd pleasers, like future classics, we call them, because of course still nobody's ever heard of us. Future classics, and also there's some very exotic kind of, unusual things that you could, that you will never taste anywhere else. That there's no map for.
What's the process of developing a flavor?
Well, so I'm going to have to speak for Gina because this is really her domain. And I'm very lucky to be able to work with her and to have her as my partner because she has an amazing ability to imagine the way things will taste before she tastes them. She has, she has a sense memory and a sensory imagination that I don't have. So that's an incredible advantage in terms of being able to come up with successfully good tasting blends. So that we actually don't have a massive amount of trial and error because so many of her ideas turn out to be delicious. So anyway, so I'll talk about the process more mechanically though, because like in a way, so I have to talk about it in terms of like what, Gina's special ability, because she is our kind of like master flavor engineer. Well, actually, no, our flavor creator or our blend master or whatever you want to call it.
Gina has a background in smells.
Well, right.
And taste and smell are kind of tertiary?
No, they're massively linked. Like most of what we consider flavor is actually aroma. It's called retronasal olfaction. So like when you chew food, you actually smell it while you're choosing it. Anyway, it's a thing.
Did you guys know that? I didn't know that.
You're smelling it through the back of your through the tubes in the back of your mouth that reach your olfactory bulb. Anyway, but yeah, when Gina was a little girl, she wanted to be a nose, like a perfume blender. So it's kind of, and she's also, had periods where she was very much involved in poetry and she studied literature. And so in a way, being the kind of like chief creative officer for August, she brings together the poetry and the olfactory and the flavor, like all of those sensibilities together in one thing. And it's absolutely her favorite part of the job is the creation of the flavor and the creation of the language that describes it. Because she doesn't just do the flavor, she also is the one who names the teas, writes the flavor notes, and talks basically like is the one who kind of gives them life. So
what do you do?
I don't do anything.
That can't be true. That can't be true.
No. I'll talk about that in a minute because I want to stay on topic. So the process is basically Gina has her flavor dream. She communicates it to our blending partner. So we work with a company in Germany who it does all of the actual production of our tea. So they source the ingredients, they test them to make sure they're free of large amounts of pesticides and heavy metals, and they test for purity and all that stuff. And then they actually do the blending, a combination of those ingredients to our specification, and then ship us the finished tea. So in a way, like they are kind of the kitchen and Gina is kind of the head chef. So the way that it typically works is that she will dream up a flavor concept. So we send it over to our German partner, and then they do the work of translating that into a manufacturable blend using the ingredients that they have access to. And then it's a process of iteration. So they send us a first draft, like an initial hand-blended sample. And then, it'll come to us. We taste it. We send them back notes and kind of revision notes. And then we continue to iterate until we either kill the concept or find something that is ready to be released. And we probably do about 10 to 20 blends for every one tea that we put out. So we have an enormous library of unreleased blends that are just kind of like waiting to, have their day. But we try to be very judicious about what we release because, there are a variety of reasons, but a lot of tea companies have 300, 500 different blends available, and it's totally overwhelming.
Yeah, you got the customers are going to have a paralysis of choice or something at that point.
I think choice paralysis is a real problem in tea, and nobody needs 300 or 500 tea blends. Like, that's just ridiculous. We don't need to have every single blend available in like 5 different base teas, like the white version of this, the black version of this, the oolong version of no, it's just not necessary. I think a lot of tea companies fall into the trap of like making every imaginable variation of something. And then, the thing that would happen if we did that is if we had like 200 varieties, this stuff would start to get old. And tea that is not fresh does not taste amazing. It tastes kind of dull.
Except for pour.
Well, pour is different. Pour is the only tea that gets better as it ages.
Do you have any teas that are based on pour?
Not currently. We've had one in the past, but not right now.
So you're mostly doing black and green?
Well, we do black, green, herbal, and we have a little bit of oolong. We might bring in more, but black teas massively outsell everything else, followed by green teas, followed by herbal teas, and then followed by that are single origin teas, like our unblended teas.
How many people are making tea lattes with your drinks versus just drinking it straight?
I couldn't answer that question. Because it's so hard to know exactly how people are consuming the product once they kind of get it into their home. Our main customer is like the individual. So, because we're a direct-to-consumer brand, we have customers all over the country, and they make it however they like it. So some people will enjoy it with milk, some people will enjoy it straight, some people make it iced, some people make it hot. So it's probably time for us to do another big, gigantic survey to try to learn more, because the last time we did one was a few years ago. And, it's really interesting to check in with people and just hear about what they're doing with our tea. Because we have a very specific process that we recommend, but we also encourage people to drink the tea however it delights them. We don't want to have a really restrictive, dogmatic approach, because everyone's palate is different.
I remember the last time we talked about August. I mean, basically, the last time we did this interview, and I was at your apartment,
right?
And you gave me like a sample box. You went into great detail about how you've got very specific instructions about which temperature and for how long, and you were selling kettles that could boil it, or not boil, but raise the water temperature to very specific degrees, and you had timers. Is that still part of your business?
It's still the case, absolutely. But I think it's important to say that that's not the price of admission. That's something for the people who want to go deeper. And we sell very, very few kettles, scales, etc. Like all those tools that are for the kind of like the person who wants to really control every variable and wants to really optimize tea and get it to be like the exact most consistent, perfect flavor every time. That's a minority of people. The majority of people just make tea with whatever means that they're comfortable with. And that's okay for us, because as long as they're happy, we're happy. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to say, here's what we think is optimal. And so part of that does come into education, where, we talk about what are the big variables in tea brewing, and what are the things that could be affecting whether your tea is bitter or too weak or too strong. All of those, there aren't that many of them. It's really just time, temperature, the ratio of tea to water. That's pretty much it. If you have a total handle on those things, then you can make your tea taste however you want.
How about the type of water?
Well, so that's honestly, that is another very significant factor that it doesn't get enough attention, but that's a hard one to change, especially
most people don't have a lot of control over their water source, right?
Exactly. And it's a lot to ask of people, to say, oh, well, your municipal water is not good for brewing tea, so buy bottled water. It's just like, it can be, it's kind of a can of worms. But, honestly, like some cities, for example, my mother has a house in Florida where the entire municipal water system is treated with reverse osmosis.
Oh.
And reverse osmosis,
sounds good, right?
Well, reverse osmosis makes very good tasting drinking water, but it makes terrible tea. Awful tea. I cannot stand it. And the reason, as far as I can tell, is that reverse osmosis has very few minerals left in the water, because it strips so much out of the water in its natural state, both the good and the bad, the things that, that make bad aromas or, that dirty the water, but also the good minerals that you might find in spring water or in more, more natural, less processed water. And so what you get in tea made with reverse osmosis water is a very thin, kind of brittle, like bitter and weak flavor profile. It's, I think it's awful. I think it's like one of the worst things. The only thing worse is distilled water. I haven't had tea made with stinky well water. I mean, I've definitely had some stinky well water in my life, but like in the past. But it can be pretty bad. So, and also some people have reverse osmosis systems in their home that they've gone to tremendous expense to install and maintain. And, it's kind of hard to ask somebody, okay, don't use that for tea. But, the people who are really hardcore about optimizing the tea and making it taste amazing will find another way. So it's not like usually the first thing that comes to mind for me, water quality, but it's critical. Water, I mean, tea is 98% water, I think. So the way the composition of the water is super critical to having good tasting tea.
Get a new subscriber.
Do it.
X. Where's the X on this thing? Oh, subscribe. Yay!
こんにちは。こんにちは。
Making connections, man.
What did you do?
Oh man.
This interview's going places.
Well, we're having a conversation about tea.
It's nice.
Nice.
What are you smoking there?
I hope marijuana. This is not marijuana. I hope
What is
Right.
it?
this is some I don't know, some weed. Not weed, just something leaf. I don't know.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No.
No.
大丈夫です。
Okay, I guess let's continue. Let's start with a kampai.
I'm sorry.
Come by.
I want to compile with you guys. Can I compile with you guys or?
If you buy a beer, I guess.
Yeah, I can buy. Or if you don't want to.
I mean, it's a little off topic for the video, but
Oh,
it is, interesting in some weird way.
how you think?
But we only have 2 microphones.
Yeah.
No problem.
Man, I gotta go back to the old seat. I thought this was gonna be better framing,
We're
but
gonna,
I don't
we're
know.
gonna have to get another mic.
このインタビューの後で、
Okay.
今は仕事をする。
Alright. This is a.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, guys.
No, 大丈夫、大丈夫。面白いと思います。Well, we may be joined by somebody or not. Who knows?
A visitor.
A visitor.
A new challenger arrives.
Now that I moved, I put the mic in totally the wrong spot again.
I'll stay close.
There we go.
So, our time is short because shit's about to get party over here, it seems. So what should we talk about next?
Well, what are you doing if Gina's doing all the creative work and I thought you were a creative
okay,
person?
okay.
What,
Yeah,
what are
that's
you
right.
doing?
That's right. I kind of left that hanging. So I'm, I guess in terms of like roles, Gina is the kind of like the artist and I'm the engineer. So I handle the company operations, like all of the kind of like getting things made on time. I handle I oversee the financial part of the business, and all of the kind of like the business modeling, which, my training is not in that. So I have a very capable person who does that with me. But like all of the mechanisms of the business, I'm kind of managing in one way or another. The other part is that I'm kind of overseeing a lot of the, the ways in which we communicate with people in a very general sense. Like I'm kind of like designing the customer journey, and thinking about how we can engage with people more. And I mean, I guess the other part that's not inconsequential is that I'm responsible for all of the packaging, graphic design, visual design, website design, product photography, like all of the kind of visual touch points of the brand are mine. And, it's easy for me to overlook that because that's what my training is in. I'm kind of like my professional career before starting August was in product design and graphic design. And so I kind of take for granted that I do those things. And my father's a professional photographer. And so the photography is also kind of something that's easy to overlook for me, but that's also a big part of what I do. Although hopefully, we're going to get to the point very soon where I can actually start delegating those responsibilities to people who don't also have to worry about running the business, because
Which would you rather do, run the business or to take care of the visual aspect?
it's a great question. I mean, I am content to be the person that creates the conditions for beautiful things to happen. I don't have to be the one who makes the beautiful things happen. And this is something that I kind of learned, being a project leader or design lead person at IDEO. It's like, I don't have to be the one who designs. It's much more important for me to get things into the world and to have things in the world be satisfying and beautiful. And I don't have to be at the center of that at all. I love to do that when I can. And God, I wish, I follow so many people on Instagram who are like, who are young graphic designers or, typographers, lettering people, street artists, etc., painters, sculptors. I want to be all of those people. I like desperately want to like be a kind of like solo creator who just like only cares about aesthetics and making something beautiful. But at the same time, like that's just not my world right now. So I have to really focus. So right now in the world of August, it's
Speaking of focusing,
yeah. In the world of August, it's incredibly important that I'm getting out of the way, and that I'm getting hiring people who can do what I can do, but without my time constraints. So, yeah,
it's hard to
I have to let go.
let go. It's
I have
hard
to
to
let
let
go.
go and trust people that someone's going to do a good job. And sometimes, like one of the things I've felt a lot in the past is the time it would take me to describe what needs to be done. I could have just done it.
Right, but you only have to do that once. That's the thing, because it's when you train somebody thoroughly, and you really you really give somebody the tools to do the thing that you've been doing yourself, then you can rely. If you have somebody that you can rely on, they'll be able to do it again and again, and that's the magic of actually delegating. I can tell you're already having a very good night. What's your name?
I'm Leo.
Leo.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Take care, man.
Bye, Leo.
Leo. He was cool. He was fun. I would hang out with him. I seriously would. If we weren't doing an interview right now.
I feel like we're being jerks then.
Well, we're doing something else.
I
We're
know.
busy.
I know. It's like I'm
busy.
sorry that we already had something going on.
Yeah, totally.
I'm just happy that you're letting me record this anyways, because I don't know how intrusive it might be.
For me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to hang out with you. So
Yeah.
if this is the price of hanging out with you, I'll happily pay it.
Part of the reason why I'm doing this is there's been so many times that I've hung out with a friend, and I've just been so in love with the conversation we had, but there's no record of it.
Right.
Well,
it's ephemeral.
Yeah. So here we are hanging out, and there's some kind of, record of it.
There's a lot of misinformation out there about tea. There's a lot of confusing, contradictory information out there, and we try to be like a very kind of sane, stable, understandable source of info that doesn't have a lot of weird traditions or mysticism or that sort of thing.
You introduced me to Neil Stephenson.
Neil Stephenson, okay.
I don't know if it's Stephenson or Stephenson, but
I'm not sure.
the cyberpunk author, the cyberpunk turned historic / cryptographic author.
Yeah, he kind of does it all.
And in Cryptonomicon, there's a whole paragraph or chapter about the temperature at which tea should be brewed.
No way. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
The main character was having a meeting with a Chinese gentleman who was complaining that everybody boils their tea and brews their tea at boiling temperature, and that is incorrect. I mean, that's kind of...
Would you like me to comment on that?
I mean, it's just kind of weird that this book about a data haven, essentially Cryptonomicon is a story about a data haven. And it has this whole section devoted to the musings of how people brew tea incorrectly.
I think Neil Stephenson is the master of the info dump, and it's part of it's part of his writing style that he has these massive digressions that go deeply into the intricacies of things that are not really related to the central story or only tangentially, and they're part of his fascinating way of explaining the world, of researching it obsessively and explaining it, and fitting it into a narrative that makes it compelling. I actually have not read Cryptonomicon. That's one of his books that I kind of skipped over. Maybe because it was one of his first really, really, really thick books.
Fat.
There's
a lot of pages in that book.
It's fat as hell. Yeah, and so like I kind of was not really ready for that, so I missed that one. But it's cool to know that he did that. I might have to check it out now. But his character is absolutely right that like not every tea should be made at boiling. They just shouldn't. The reason for that is that different water temperatures extract different compounds from within the tea leaves. And so to make this really gettable, green tea is one of the most easy varieties to kind of like ruin with bad water temperature. So everyone who's ever, drank a lot of tea is going to have had horribly bitter green tea at some point in their lives, if not at every point in their lives. Because green tea contains a lot of chlorophyll. That's what makes it green. Chlorophyll is the compound in plants that photosynthesizes sunlight into, material that the plant can run on. And so the chlorophyll's incredibly bitter. It's very, very bitter. And and you will extract chlorophyll from the tea if you're brewing it at boiling. But if you bring the water temperature down to about 80 C or 175 Fahrenheit, you get to a water temperature where you can extract all of the tasty flavor compounds from the tea without extracting too much chlorophyll, and then you get a nice, delicious, kind of slightly sweet, grassy green tea that's really, really pleasant. But that's just one of the compounds that where water temperature has a big influence over whether or not you're getting a flavor that you don't want. Similarly, more oxidized teas like black teas, oolongs, etc., have tannic compounds that have a little bit of a bitter or kind of like mouth puckering
Tannic?
tannins. So you might be familiar with the term tannins from wine. Tannins, exactly. So tannic is an adjective version
Is
of
it
that.
different than tonic?
Correct. And really what that comes down to is bitterness in a way. And so if you are brewing your black teas with off-boil water, you'll extract less of those bitter tannins, and you'll have a kind of like milder, sweeter tasting tea at the end. So some teas really do benefit from a strong boil, especially if you're going to be making a black tea with milk and sugar, kind of like British style. Like, yes, definitely make it with fully boiling water, but if you're making a really high quality single origin Chinese black tea, don't use the boiling water. It'll over extract it. It'll end up bitter. And, it's better to taste it a little bit at a more ideal extraction. And so a lot of the, we currently offer a tea called In the Mood for Love, which is a Keemun Malfang black tea that really tastes best at around 190 or about 90 C. And if you brew that tea at full boil, you'll get much more kind of tannic compounds, and it'll be much more bitter, and you'll completely miss the lovely malty, silky mouthfeel that you get from brewing it a little bit below boil. So, Stephenson was right, as usual. He's a great researcher. Every tea, for whatever your palate is, and whatever, an individual's palate is, every tea has its a temperature where it's going to taste its best.
This discussion has me wondering, what are you kind of adding to your teas when you have these complex blends? And those other ingredients, how does the temperature of water affect them?
One thing that we get asked often is about, do you cold brew teas? Cold brew coffee is like a huge trend at the moment. And 10 years ago it wasn't. But people ask us frequently, what are your instructions for cold brewing tea? And we generally don't recommend it. And that's because so many of our teas are blended and have non-tea ingredients that won't necessarily extract at low temperatures. So, for example, some of our teas include caramel. And, caramel, of course, it's a crystallized sugar. You need a little bit of temperature to actually get that to dissolve and integrate into the tea. If you've ever tried to add granulated sugar to an iced coffee, it just sits at the bottom. So we don't have that in a lot of our teas, but that's just one example of an ingredient that like will really only extract with a higher temperature. That said, generally speaking, the non-tea ingredients that we use in our blends, like, just to list a few, like vanilla, lemongrass, orange slices, dragon fruit, olive leaf, all of those things do kind of rely on temperature in order to release their flavor. And so there's a range at which they taste good and maybe at which they stop tasting good. And we tend to test our blends, not so much at the individual ingredient level, but at the composite level. So, we're not sitting there like with a sample of olive leaf, testing the olive leaf at like 100C, 90C, 80C, or tasting the whole blend at different temperatures to figure out where everything is at its best.
Okay, so Gina has an idea for a tea.
Yes.
She sends it to the
To
kitchen.
Germany.
They send back, we think this is what you want. And then you guys try it at various temperatures and see if it is indeed what you want.
Mm-hmm.
If it is, okay, green light. If it's not, make some adjustments, try again. And then... Or cancel. What kind of percentage of failures do you have?
It's hard to say. It kind of depends on the batch. Sometimes the failure percentage is really, really low, like, 20% or less. Sometimes it's really high. It just depends on what we're kind of exploring at that moment.
What's the worst thing that you've ever been sent from the factory, and how did it taste?
God.
Come on, the worst one.
Let me think.
The most failed experiment.
I'm going to demur a little bit on this one and just say that, we've had some things that kind of like tasted like what you would imagine it would be like to drink the extract of potpourri.
All right.
You just don't want that.
Very perfumey.
Yeah, well, or just like, like perfumey, but in a way where you're like, this shouldn't be in my mouth.
Yeah.
No.
Like spraying perfume into your mouth.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it's not, it's an occupational hazard. It's not kind of like the fault of anybody in particular. It's just sometimes some things get combined that shouldn't be combined.
But you don't have any specific ingredients that were a bad combination?
Well, we have had some ingredients that are, that we've had to learn to retire in a way because, like we found that certain ingredients just don't have the shelf life that we need. I mean, the tea itself lasts a really long time. From production to like kind of the best buy date, you have a couple of years where it will still taste excellent. But we found that some blends that rely on very specific like hero ingredients sometimes those hero ingredients don't last as long as the tea does. And, we've learned from our mistakes and, this is an experimental process for everybody.
Was that through customer feedback that you discovered that, or were you drinking eating your own dog food, as it were?
Both. We drink our own tea every day, and we're, we don't make anything that we don't love and that we don't want to have in our own home. So, it's very much like a personal product. It's something that we make to please ourselves as well as, everybody else. But then, also like sometimes when we've, we'll get a note of feedback from a customer where, they say something's really off, and then that'll alert us to go test it and make sure that everything's fine. And there have been a few cases where we've actually been like, oh, wow, this one doesn't taste right anymore. And then that's when we've had to retire a blend. And sometimes that happens. The part of what we do is to kind of like break new ground and make teas that nobody's ever made before. And, sometimes they're not perfect. And, we have to kind of like, sometimes we have to like stop making them and maybe come back and try again.
A customer that kind of brings that to your attention, you think that type of customer is going to stick around. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, that's a great question.
You know?
Sure, it totally does. I mean, somebody who's had a bad experience and told us about it. Well, I mean, I hope so. Either way, that person has done us a favor by taking the time to communicate that they had a bad experience with our product. Because, I mean, that's, people are giving us, like, they're taking their time to give us feedback, which is incredibly valuable because, I mean, everybody's busy. Everybody's got a lot going on in their lives. And, it's vital when people tell us about things like that. And we really try to let them know how much we value their feedback, even when it's negative, because, they're kind of the life of the company in a way. So we really try to encourage people to communicate with us at any point and with any kind of feedback, whether it's positive or negative or neutral.
I welcome constructive feedback, and I give a lot of constructive feedback. If I go to a restaurant and I'm not happy, if I think that the French toast is off from the previous time, and especially if I'm friends with the owner, I'll definitely kind of give honest feedback. And sometimes the people I'm with, maybe my girlfriend, they'll be like, why you always have to be nosy? And as a designer, I'm like, well, if it was my restaurant, I would want to know,
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to keep doing it. However, I had with my Switchbag project, I had a lot of feedback, mostly positive, some constructive, but I had one customer that no matter what I did, I couldn't satisfy their expectations.
Yeah.
So other than constructive feedback, do you have feedback that's essentially bitching and there's nothing you can do to actually rectify the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're dealing with the general public, which we do, running direct to consumer brands, when you're dealing with the general public, you're always going to find people who are so deeply unhappy with their experience that there's nothing you can do to make it right for them. And sometimes people are, but in the initial moment of contact, I've learned that it is not always easy to discern whether somebody is just really upset and frustrated, or if somebody is totally irreconcilably, there's nothing you can do. So we have a customer service culture of very extreme patience at August, because we have a lot of people, we communicate with people sometimes on Facebook ads or via Facebook Messenger, and people are angry on Facebook. It's there's a lot of people who are like very vitriolic, and there's a lot of trolling and a lot of angry, upset people in general. Sometimes people will express their frustration and anger in a very glib and unbelievably direct way. And, we have to be like, okay, we're getting negative feedback. Let's calm down ourselves before responding and try to understand how we can help the person. Because frequently their frustration is something that we can do something about. Sometimes people are not happy with the product they bought, and in many cases we refund their money, because that's part of, we guarantee people's satisfaction. If they don't like the tea, if they try it and they don't like it, okay, fine. We give them their money back. I mean, it's just, we want to make it easy for people to try our stuff. And, if they don't like the way it tastes, sometimes we'll offer brewing tips if they're interested in getting them. Sometimes people get very frustrated because the postal service is having trouble and the order hasn't arrived on time. There are all kinds of reasons people are frustrated, and we really, really try to de-escalate ourselves first so that we can kind of untangle the difficult emotions, because sometimes people are really, sometimes people have trouble asking for exactly what they want when they're really upset. And so, we try to be extremely patient, and then occasionally we have a person who is just never going to be anything but mad. and then we just try to find a way to end the conversation gracefully and just step away. It's the customer service aspect of a direct-to-consumer business is incredibly important, and we've really had to learn a lot as we've grown.
At this point, I mean, I'm sure at the beginning, you and Gina must have done 100% of the customer service replies. I still do 100% of any Seifu customer service replies. But do you guys still directly do it now, or do you have somebody in charge of that stuff?
We do. We still work on it. Gina more than I. Gina has really taken on, as we've started to grow, a lot more of the customer relationships, as well as kind of like being very much the kind of like culture lead within the company as the staff's grown. So she's the one who's like making cool things happen for our employees and kind of like, helping to like have everybody doing cool stuff that's not just, the busy work that we do every day. So she's really the kind of like mastermind behind like how we engage with the customer. But sorry, I just completely like lost my train of thought. Could you ask me your original question again? Right. If we're still
who's
doing
handling customer
Thank
service?
you.
Yeah.
So Gina's the architect of the customer service and has written a lot of the, like, she kind of has defined the kind of style and the language that we use, but everyone in the company works on it. So right now we're a team of 6, 7 very soon, and everybody takes a turn. And so the reason why we do that is so Gina and I stay engaged because
even like the warehouse managers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All of the people that we hire are awesome. Like
Wait, logistically, how do you actually have people take a turn with customer service?
Okay, so we let me get to that next, because I want to kind of like talk a little bit more about why we rotate and like why it's important to do that. So we rotate because it can't be just one person. You'd get kind of numb and like, would become very kind of, you would get kind of numb to people's needs, and, you would get very mechanical in your replies and all that stuff. And I think it would be very difficult for somebody to do it all day long every day. I'm sure people do, but, we don't have somebody with the talent to do that well, or the background. And of course, Gina and I, who like, we're the ones who started it off, our bandwidth is getting narrower and narrower for doing things like that. But the reason why we think it's really important for everyone to touch the customer service part of the company is because it is the place where you hear all of the stories of joy and all of the stories of pain from our customers, and it helps you to connect to the real people who are buying our tea and to hear their stories. And when you're working in a warehouse where you're just bringing product in and shipping product out, and that's what we do, just like our employees. It's alienating. It's not like working in a retail store where or a tea bar, or where you can put a product in front of somebody and watch their expression change when they drink it. You need that connection. You need to form that connection with the customer, and you need to be in contact with them in order to just understand the impact you're having in the world. So part of our culture of like sharing the responsibility for customer service is to actually connect with real people who are our customers, and not just to kind of have that be somebody's responsibility, like off in a cubicle somewhere. So that's the ethos behind it. The practicality of it is that, we use some software, a ticket management software that handles all of our incoming email and like Facebook Messenger, kind of contacts from customers, and, associates that data with their customer account. So whenever anybody emails us, we know right in the same window, like what their last order was and which items they bought and all that stuff. So, so basically we use some software to make that process a multi-user process, and also to make it one where it's very deeply integrated with the e-commerce side of the software. So it's not like, just a shared Gmail inbox or something.
Do you mind sharing what that software is and also
Yeah.
what other tools you use to organize your company?
Well, that one specifically is called Gorgeous, but the spelling is a little weird. It's Gorgias, and it is, I believe, built specifically for Shopify. So if you're a Shopify merchant, Gorgeous is amazing, and it's a fairly new platform that basically like integrates really deeply with your customer data and allows you to,
It's considered a CRM. Do you know that one?
I think you could call it that. Yeah, we just lost our key light.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I wonder why. That was some nice stuff. We had some nice... Maybe they're looks like they're closing. Do you think you want to get another beer before?
Yeah, I think they're done.
Do you want more?
Let's get another beer somewhere else.
Somewhere else?
Yeah, yeah. Kampai time.
Kampai.
Kampai.
Kampai. So this is the second time that we have been
we've made
accosted,
friends.
or made friends.
We've made friends.
You know, one person's making friends is another person's being accosted.
We're in the right neighborhood for that.
英語を話しますか？
英語話せません。
日本人はあまり英語を話しません。だから日本語を勉強したいです。日本語をもっと上手になりたいです。
頑張れ。
ありがとうございます。乾杯。
乾杯。
We were talking about software tools. You finished telling us about
Gorgeous, the
Gorgeous.
ticket management system for Shopify merchants. Yeah.
I'll look into that.
Okay.
Do you use any other tools to help your team coalesce?
Team chat is on Slack. Super helpful, just because otherwise we'd be relying on email or text messages. We rely really heavily on an inventory management system called Deer. That's a like really inexpensive but super versatile one that just allows us to understand a lot about our product costing and inventory velocity and all that kind of stuff.
Is that spelled DEAR?
Exactly, yeah. Based in New Zealand. It's the kind of software that you would have had to have bought from Oracle 20 years ago for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now it's a few $100 a month.
Oh.
So it's awesome. Although very hard to use.
The problem normally with Slack or Trello or whatever, any like online team system is if your team's not actually using it.
Oh, yeah. Adherence is super important. But, we're all in one building, so it's not that hard.
Oh, so are you guys co-located in your warehouse?
Yeah, we're all in the same place.
Well, that's cool. How's Japan?
Japan's awesome. I love Japan. I tried to come here a lot. Why? Because it's a different world. The culture is so different. Atmosphere is so different. People so different. Food so different. It's refreshing.
Japanese food like it?
It's my favorite. I think we've hit the omega point.
つまんなかった。
This is as good as it's gonna get.
It's as good as it's gonna get. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me
Okay.
ramble.
Well, okay, we talked a lot about tea. That's cool.
We talked about tea.
A lot of interesting stuff there. We didn't talk much about this current Japan trip. Like we just touched on it very briefly at the very beginning, and I wouldn't mind talking about it a little bit more before we run out of tape here.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the 2-minute version.
Okay.
So, for a couple of years, my mother has wanted to hike the Kumonokodo Pilgrimage Trail, which is in the Kii Peninsula, and it goes from temple to temple to temple. It's an old Shinto pilgrimage trail. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it really feels like a totally ancient, primordial part of the country. And so we've been trying to plan this for a while. So we did a 5-day itinerary, hiking from temple to temple through the deepest woods. And it was totally magical. It was amazing. Super challenging physically. Sometimes we had more than 1,000 meters of elevation change in one day, usually about 10 miles a day of hiking. But amazing, totally amazing. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
How many days was the total hiking trip?
I would say 3 days of very heavy hiking and then 2 more days of lighter hiking and, with more buses involved.
Well, it was cool that you came to Japan. I got your message a few months ago saying you're going to come to Japan in September. It'd be great if we could meet up. Here we are meeting up. This is it.
It happened.
This is the meeting.
It happened. By the way, we've known each other since 5th grade, so, you know. Or 4th grade or something like
Something
that.
like that. I don't know
The
exactly.
day we met, you shot an arrow straight up in the air, and it about 40 seconds later, it landed at the roof of your house 10 feet away from us. I will never forget that day.
Right. Well, this has been another episode of the Design Exchange podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Thomas Grové, and my guest today was Aaron Shinn.
Thank you.
Of August Uncommon Tea. You can find out more about their tea company at august.la or on Instagram.
At August Uncommon.
Thank you very much, and see you later.
Thank you. You do it. You press the button.
We have a little time here, a video for the next
The credits?
the buttons to click to the next
Oh,
video
right, yeah.
on
Very,
YouTube.
very important.